Keith, I want to ask you about the policy reform components of this, because what you said was really interesting, that on the one hand, what you all try and do is sort of intervene for the individual families that are struggling to escape poverty. And I would say in my conversations with these families over the years, without fail, they want to get off of these programs. They want to work and earn, and they want to achieve what I would call work-based self-reliance or independence. And they're hungry for it. And so on the one hand, you're intervening to try and help that happen. But you alluded to this idea that, well, there's this realization of sort of this broader policy space, both for practitioners and these policy reform conversations. Can you talk a little bit about what the Beyond the Cliff Coalition is doing in that space? And as I mentioned before the break, there's a new set of policy recommendations you guys have out. So let's talk through some of that. What do people need to know?
So, we brought this coalition together about a year and a half ago, and really this first year and a half was about essentially comparing notes between the various practitioner partners we brought together. So looking at what works, what are we seeing work, where is that evidence for navigating around benefits cliffs, and again, connecting families to those economic opportunities. And so we developed a framework of really to help inform practice. So it was about sort of what are some of those common things that interventions have. Before we talked about that family-centered coaching, there are other sort of coaching approaches, but broadly, you want to put families at the center of the work that you're doing. You want to come from a strength-based approach. That's just one, for example, of some of those practice elements we identified. And so what we did from there is we took those practice elements and we asked ourselves, with the evidence we have, with the evidence that's out there more widely, like what are the recommendations we can make today that can help address this problem through sort of a policy reform lens. And so we landed on sort of 6 broad areas of policy reform. One, as I mentioned before, that benefit reduction rate. We realize like for too many families, it is too steep. Like the financial math doesn't work. And while I think there is some opportunity to figure out exactly what that needs to look like, we can say with a straight face and with confidence that we need Congress, we need policymakers to look at a better solution here to ensure that the phasing off of benefits is a more gradual reduction so that families have, solid footing every step of the way. Which kind of brings me to the next recommendation, which is really around asset limits. So again, ensuring that, because for a lot of, well, not for a lot of programs, but for programs that do have asset limits, in many instances, it's, $2,000, $3,000. It's not enough for if the engine goes out on your car. It's not enough for a down payment on a house so that you're not just putting money towards rent constantly. It's not, it's not financial stability. And so that was sort of the second recommendation we identified was, looking at, ensuring that our asset limits are in line with, a reasonable emergency savings amount for 2025. We also looked at the Earned Income Tax Credit, which has a fairly long history of being shown both to promote work and as a way to help sort of bridge folks off of, more sort of traditionally public welfare into more, the tax system and being taxpayers. And then, I think a really important one is a recommendation is promoting innovation, creating flexibilities for states or just clarifying even the flexibilities that states have to adjust those public benefit programs within their own states to better help mitigate benefits cliffs. And then from there, we have recommendations that are focused on, because it's, as we've been discussing, right, it's one thing to on paper solve for benefits cliffs, but that you also need that employment opportunity. And so, we really encourage policymakers to look at ways to better align our workforce development system and workforce opportunities to individuals who are navigating off of public assistance. And just for some examples, which very encouragingly, we're seeing at the federal level right now is earn and learn opportunities. So like apprenticeships, which is a significant priority for the Trump administration. So that's encouraging because those are things that are in line with I think what we see as opportunities for families. And then the last recommendation that we have is, again, it's that evidence-based coaching. So really putting families at the center in from a strength-based perspective of how do we get you set up to move forward. And I would also put within that the importance of actually the public benefits counseling, because we've had these conversations before, right? It's for many families, this is a very real structural problem. They are worse off financially for taking that job. For some families, it's frankly that there's just so much misconception or misperception that this could be as simple as really just sitting down looking at, okay, well, what would it look like if you took that job? And even if there is a financial hit, if it's coming, you can make a plan in advance. So I think those are, broadly, those are our recommendations. There's lots of little sub bullets under that but I know we don't have time to get into all that today.
Well, we'll include the link in our show notes to the actual document, obviously to the website as well, and folks can go through that in detail. I want to comment on something though, because some of the things you mentioned in kind of that basket of policy ideas, of potential interventions that people can consider. Here in Utah, we've mentioned on the show before, I think, that we worked to get Sutherland. We have a working group, so the legislature, the governor's office, Department of Workforce Services, some outside organizations like the Georgia Center for Opportunity. There's just this great collaborative effort where we together were able to successfully get the legislature to create and fund a pilot program using TANF dollars, that's temporary assistance for needy families, over a 3-year period to essentially test out some of these kinds of things. I mean, it had been in the works for a while, but it's really great to see some of the parallels where the things that we've decided to focus on in the pilot here in Utah are, number one, that financial planning element, that a family saying, well, we have this opportunity to increase our income, but we're worried about what that's going to do to our public benefits. Are we going to be worse off or not? I think there's probably a good number of families right now that are making that decision, maybe not with perfect full information, and maybe partly out of fear and worry. And the ability for them to see, I would say with precision and accuracy, what that looks like, they can actually financially forecast and plan. And to your point, then kind of know how to act, because I imagine some families would see that and would say, well, that's not as bad as I thought. That's not as bad as I feared. I can say yes to this economic opportunity and progress. Other families may say, yeah, that really is a true structural cliff. And then to your point, work with a counselor, a coach, a mentor. Say, okay, how do we navigate this? Because we still want to progress somehow. What's the right way to do it to where I'm not making my family worse off? And so that navigation, financial planning, and the coaching and mentoring just seem really essential. We'll obviously, of course, see how the pilot goes here in Utah. And the third that I want to touch on is robust data capture. That's something that we're doing in our pilot, and I think you guys are as well, and some of the things you're working on and tracking. Because part of this, in my view, is seeing what works, what specific interventions work to help these families right now, but also having a lot of really good real-time administrative data to then be able to have a stronger case for future reforms, ideally at the federal level, down the road. So can you talk about, maybe one quick question before we go to our next break? From a policy reform standpoint, you were laying out these recommendations. What do you really hope happens over the next 6 months, 12 months, couple years? Like, give us a sense of, man, this would be amazing to see accomplished.
Absolutely. And I should probably, I'm speaking for myself here. I'm not necessarily representing Beyond the Cliff as a coalition, but I think my hope is, well, one part obviously is that we simply continue to raise awareness about the issue, because I think there are, many policymakers who aren't yet familiar with this. So I think one part is just how do we continue to engage? And part of that, my hope is that creates the opening to have, really thoughtful discussions. I think about our CEO shares. I'm going to use her words, so I'm going to attribute it to her. So we have yet to explain. We've done a lot of educating of policymakers in Tennessee. We're now, engaging federal policymakers. We engage employers, and we've yet to have anybody, get educated on the benefits cliff and not say, well, that's dumb. So I think that's our first step, is let's get everybody to just go, what we're doing now is not working for families. And ultimately it's not working for taxpayers. It's not working for employers. Everybody is losing by not addressing this issue. So I hope we can, build more of that momentum. I think, again, speaking for myself, I see a lot of opportunity around how can we, over the next year, I would say, how do we support that state innovation, help states understand where their flexibilities are, and help better identify where states need more support to better support families and being able to get ahead. I think that's in the near term, the most practical next step. And for the reason you just raised as well is I didn't mention it before when I talked about that recommendation, but absolutely agree. We need more robust data. We need more evidence of what works, of where the system isn't working. And so I think the more we can do to, support states in testing innovative approaches and collecting data, that helps us, build towards a better informed, sort of ultimate policy reform at the federal level.
Thanks for watching that clip of Defending Ideas. For the full conversation, click the link in the description and make sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your shows.